The ground trembled. Dust rained down. The once stable cave now felt like a living entity, shaking and groaning as if it were in pain. Small rocks began to fall from the ceiling, each one a harbinger of the chaos to come. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe, and the sound of the earth shifting was deafening. It was as if the mountain itself was trying to swallow them whole. John froze, fear gripping his heart. His mind raced, but his body refused to move. He could feel the cold sweat trickling down his back, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. The darkness of the cave seemed to close in around him, amplifying his terror. He had never felt so helpless, so utterly at the mercy of the elements. A terrifying rumble echoed through the cavern. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth, a deep, resonant growl that shook the walls and sent shivers down his spine. The echoes bounced off the stone, creating a cacophony that was both disorienting and terrifying. It was as if the cave was alive and it was angry. The rumble grew louder, more insistent, and John knew that he had to move, had to find a way out before it was too late. He looked back, eyes wide with terror. The path he had come from was now a wall of falling debris, the way forward obscured by dust and darkness. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. He could feel the weight of the mountain pressing down on him, the air growing thinner with each passing second. He had to find a way out, but every direction seemed fraught with danger. The cave was a labyrinth, and he was hopelessly lost within it. The entrance, his only way out, was gone. The once clear path was now a solid wall of rock, impenetrable and unyielding. He could see the faint outline of the outside world, a sliver of light that seemed impossibly far away. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was trapped. Panic began to set in, his breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. He had to find another way, but the cave was a maze of tunnels and dead ends, each one more treacherous than the last. Boulders now blocked it, sealing him inside the mountain. The rocks were massive, each one weighing hundreds of pounds, and there was no way he could move them on his own. He was completely cut off from the outside world, his only hope of escape buried under tons of stone. The reality of his situation began to sink in, and he felt a wave of despair wash over him. He was alone, trapped in the dark, with no way out. John stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The enormity of his situation was overwhelming, and he felt his legs give out beneath him. He sank to the ground, his back against the cold, unforgiving stone. His mind was a whirlwind of fear and desperation, each thought more frantic than the last. He had to stay calm, had to think clearly, but the darkness and the silence were oppressive, suffocating. He could feel the walls closing in, the air growing thinner, and he knew he had to act fast. He felt a surge of panic, his chest tightened, his breaths coming in shallow, rapid bursts. He could feel his heart racing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had to find a way out, had to escape before it was too late. But every direction seemed blocked, every path a dead end. The cave was a labyrinth, and he was hopelessly lost within it. He had to stay calm, had to think clearly, but the fear was overwhelming, threatening to consume him. Walls of rock pressed in on him, stealing the air, squeezing the hope from his lungs. This couldn't be happening. He had come into the cave seeking adventure, but now it was a prison, a tomb. The narrow passages seemed to close in around him, the weight of the mountain pressing down on his chest. He could feel the air growing thinner, each breath a struggle. He had to find a way out, had to escape before it was too late. But the cave was a maze, and he was hopelessly lost within it. Not here. Not now. He couldn't die here, trapped in the dark, alone. He had to find a way out, had to escape before it was too late. The cave was a labyrinth, and he was hopelessly lost within it, but he couldn't give up, couldn't let the fear consume him. He had to keep moving, had to find a way out. The darkness was oppressive, the silence deafening, but he had to keep going. He had to survive. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth. The cave was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, each step forward swallowed by the darkness. The walls seemed to close in, the weight of the mountain above pressing down on him. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water from the stalactites like a ticking clock, counting down to some unknown doom. And something else, something ancient and cold. It was as if the cave itself was alive, breathing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He could feel the history of the place, the countless years of darkness and silence, the weight of time itself pressing down on him. John fumbled for his flashlight, the small beam doing little to pierce the oppressive darkness. The light flickered, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. He could barely see a few feet in front of him, the darkness swallowing the light almost as soon as it appeared. His hands shook as he held the flashlight, the beam wavering with his unsteady grip. Shadows danced around him, taking the shapes of monstrous creatures in his terrified mind. Every movement seemed to bring the shadows closer, their forms shifting and changing with each flicker of the light. He could almost hear them whispering, their voices a low, guttural murmur that sent chills down his spine. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own, a malevolent presence that watched his every move. His heart pounded against his ribs. Each beat was a thunderous drum in the silence, a constant reminder of his fear. He could feel the blood rushing in his ears, his pulse quickening with every passing second. The fear was a living thing, a cold, clammy hand that gripped his heart and squeezed, making it hard to breathe. Each ragged breath echoed in the silence, a constant reminder of his isolation. The air was cold and damp, each breath a struggle against the oppressive atmosphere. He could see his breath in the beam of the flashlight, each exhale a ghostly mist that hung in the air before dissipating into the darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the occasional drip of water. The cave pressed closer, the darkness a suffocating blanket. He was trapped. The walls seemed to close in around him, the narrow passageways twisting and turning in a maze of stone. He could feel the weight of the mountain above, the crushing pressure of the earth around him. The darkness was absolute, a void that swallowed all light and sound. He was alone, lost in the depths of the earth, with no way out. John's hand flew to his throat, his fingers tracing the outline of the silver chain he always wore. A gift from his grandfather, it was supposed to bring luck. But luck had abandoned him, buried beneath tons of rock. He had always feared enclosed spaces. Elevators, crowded rooms, even cars on a traffic-jammed highway filled him with a primal dread. But this was different. This was his worst nightmare come true. A muffled sob escaped his lips. "Get a grip," he muttered to himself, his voice thin and shaky in the vast emptiness. He had to focus. Panicking wouldn't help. He scanned the rocky walls, searching for any sign of an opening, a crack, anything. But there was nothing, only the relentless pressure of the earth, the suffocating blackness pressing down. His chest tightened, each breath a shallow gasp. Fear, raw and consuming, threatened to drown him. Section 5. Desperate struggle. He pushed himself away from the wall, forcing his legs to move. He had to find a way out. There had to be another way out. He stumbled forward, the beam of his flashlight dancing crazily in the darkness. He squeezed through a narrow passage, his body scraping against rough rock. The air grew colder, damper. Fear clawed at his throat, but he pushed onward, fueled by a desperate hope. And then he saw it. A faint glow in the distance, like a beacon in the suffocating darkness. His heart leaped. Could it be? Was it possible? He surged forward, ignoring the aches in his muscles, the scrapes on his skin. He had to reach it. It was his only chance. As he drew closer, the glow intensified, revealing a narrow opening, a fissure in the rock face. John squeezed through the opening, relief washing over him as he tumbled into a larger chamber. The air was fresher here, lighter. He drew in a deep breath, the first in what felt like an eternity. He wasn't free yet, not entirely, but he had found a way. A way up. He could see a sliver of daylight high above, filtering through a crack in the ceiling, his escape. Using every ounce of strength, John climbed. He scaled the treacherous rock face, ignoring the pain, the fatigue. He had to escape the crushing embrace of the mountain. He had to feel the sun on his skin, breathe fresh air again, and then he was free. He collapsed onto the warm earth, the sun a blinding blessing on his face. He had made it. He had survived. John sat there for a long time, his chest heaving. The cave behind him was a dark reminder of the trials he had faced. Each breath he took was a testament to his endurance, a sign that he had made it through the worst. The air was thick with the scent of earth and sweat, mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood. His mind replayed the harrowing moments, the close calls and the sheer willpower it took to survive. He had ventured into the cave seeking answers, but what he found was a test of his very being. His body trembling with exhaustion and relief, he bore the scars of his ordeal, cuts and bruises that told the story of his struggle. Each mark on his skin was a badge of honor, a symbol of the battles he had fought and won. The pain was a reminder of his resilience, of the strength he never knew he possessed. As he looked at his hands, dirty and bloodied, he felt a surge of pride. He had faced the darkness and emerged, not unscathed but stronger. The relief that washed over him was overwhelming, a flood of emotions that left him trembling. He had a limp that might never fully heal, a constant reminder of the price he had paid, but he also carried the triumph of survival. He had faced his greatest fear and emerged victorious. He had stared into the abyss and found the strength to claw his way back. He was changed, forever marked by the darkness, but also forever free. The cave had tried to break him, but instead, it had forged him into something new. Each step he took was a victory, a defiance of the odds that had been stacked against him. The scars on his body were a map of his journey, a testament to his unyielding spirit. As he stepped into the sunlight, he felt a profound sense of freedom. The world seemed brighter, more vibrant, as if seeing it for the first time. The air was fresher, the colors more vivid. He had been to the brink and back, and now every moment was a gift. The weight of his ordeal was still there, but it was balanced by the lightness of his newfound freedom. He had been tested and had emerged not just as a survivor, but as a warrior. The scars would fade, but the lessons he had learned, the strength he had discovered, would stay with him forever. He was free, not just from the cave, but from the fears that had once held him captive. And in that freedom he found a new purpose, a new beginning.